Hello anyone watching, welcome to Zwift Classics. Got on the evening races with you. This is a bit of an ongoing series where there is a GC competition for each category, so it's a bit interesting, but in the early stages it isn't very clear who's ahead, so I'm not going to bother talking about that for now. This evening, on Tuesday evenings, normal ZRL slots, one of the quicker races. Hopefully see quite a strong field here today. There's lots of good sign-ups. Obviously it depends who actually turns up on the day, and given the competitiveness that everyone's wanting to set a fast time, as the time is important, not necessarily just the race win, then you get a lot of sign-ups who don't necessarily turn up. So don't look into too much of that until we see who's actually here today for the race. So today we're on the Casse-Pattes route. I'll just try and get it on screen for you. You can have a quick look at the ZwiftPower sign-ups at the moment. So hopefully you can have a look there. It's very flat, one of the standard France routes, where you just kind of one little tour of the small loop up the aqueduct, and then up the Petit KOM. This is the switchback version, direction. So then we have the long long downhill into the finish. You'll get quite high speeds through there. Because this is Cat B and it is fixed Cat, there are a couple, because it's using the Cat enforcement system, so you might see there are some A's, apart from myself. I'll see a couple that have been able to sign up. They will be DQ'd on ZwiftPower, but they are allowed to race, and eligible to race on the entry. But because of that, it shouldn't break up horrifically up the climb. Obviously the main group will split up, and the front group will get much smaller, but solo breakaways won't necessarily work. You'd expect that it's going to be a lead group of about maybe 8 to 10 riders going into the finish, possibly more, because we're fixed Cat. In the Cat A races you might see a lot more spread out, because you have some people who are going to have a much better 5 minutes, and the climb's roughly a 5-minute climb, so it'll be really broken out, and 5 minutes is a good kind of proxy for FTP. It's largely an aerobic effort, so it'll be interesting to see how we get on. If we have a couple people trying to break away, because there is the downhill, a group of 3 or more should easily chase down a 10-second gap or so on that downhill, even in super tuck. So they'll be resting while someone might try to push away. So it'll be interesting if someone tries. If you get one of the lightweight riders, I know Sam Atkinson was signed up, he might give it a shot, but again, he should have a big enough sprint to win anyway, and so it's not necessarily worth the effort or the attempt. But it's interesting to see, and it makes life a bit more interesting. Apologies for the occasional cutout. I'm slightly ill at the moment, so I might have a little bit of a cough going on. So you see Sam is signed up. We've got a couple of other strong rides in there. I've seen Paul from Dirt, Goose and Graham Miller, all strong dirt riders. See if they can hold on up the KOM, and they'll be in good contention, all of them having good sprints and good 1-minute power. But again, it'll be who can make it up that KOM. See if people try and push on the aqueduct, might split the front group, but you'd expect the strong riders still to be towards the front. So we've got 30 seconds left. Try and just keep with the front group for most of this. I mean, I'll have a little look back, but really focusing towards the front in this commentary. Apparently swapped back to me, so I'll have to do a little swap as we set off. Again, because it is essentially just a solo race. The top guys will maybe be quite conservative. Obviously GC is there, so they'll want to set a fast time. With a group this big, we've got 115 in the pen at the moment, then it should be fairly comfortably taking the fastest pace of the week. For those who aren't aware, these races are happening roughly every hour, I believe, all the way through the week, and then change course every week. So there's plenty of opportunities to race, to compete and to win, but it's going to be about the fastest time, so you're looking for a really quick race, which I expect this will be. So setting off nice and comfortably. See a little bit of stretch out, and people calling out a notorious questionable rider already. I think that's Scotty P in the blue hat. Might catch him occasionally putting out 500-600 watts. Obviously there's using a kind of dubious trainer, might not intentionally, as you see him pushing off the front already with his blue hat and his red kit. So hopefully with him this pace will be very high. I'm hoping he doesn't come away taking a good result, as he's not really made any effort despite all the comments and the advice about sorting out his power output. So let's see, people are on his wheel already, which is good to see. Gotta let him just pull them towards, and don't let him get a gap, because he can solo. with those dubious numbers. See Ian from Dirt coming across and making clear. He's not going to get a breakaway here, even if he holds 4.5 all the way to the line, which would be above what he's capable of being in Cat B. The best thing is just to sit in for now, doing nothing. Sadly, it's a bit of a boring course in that regard. It'll be quite chilled all the way until we get to the aqueduct. Might see occasional pushes, but it's unlikely to be serious. So just take a look at the back and you'll see the interesting bits of the drafting. One thing to note, we do have power-ups. I'm not actually sure, so we've got Van, Burrito and Anvil. So the Anvil might be useful on the downhill after the climb. And the Anvil, sorry. And the Van's going to be the kind of ideal one into the finish. Because we've got a Burrito, one thing you have to be aware of when you're sprinting is that you don't want to start as deep as normal. So what tends to happen is people get very caught out with Burritos in races by starting kind of mid-pack towards the back in the normal position, and they just lose all that benefit of the draft. So ideally, if you see a pack around this big, I'd suggest you want to be about 4 rows back from the front for your final sprint. Maybe if it's a smaller group, you know, proportionally higher, like within the front third, but roughly on that boundary. So roughly somewhere around here. And it just means you're out of the kind of the zone of being absolutely burritoed constantly. And you know, obviously if people off the front are burritoing, then you can guarantee people behind us there's no real advantage to being further back. You're not going to have any draft benefit. And you can kind of pace your effort sensibly so you avoid just smashing through the front and getting caught in the draft. But it means it's a little bit more tactful. You have to kind of be eyes up when you're sprinting with the burritos about. As you can see, again pushing off the front, using a draft, clearly a very experienced rider, wasting a power up there right at the front of the group. Even if you know you're on the flats, you're fairly comfortable, you want to kind of make sure you're still using your draft at the back or in the pack so you get some kind of benefit. And in these kinds of races it's all about what's the lowest watts per kilo you can hit and hold without falling off the back. And the more energy you conserve, the more you're going to have left for that 5-minute climb. It's a real testing effort. If you end up burning all your energy before doing almost 600 watts, as we see a certain rider here doing, then you know you should theoretically be left with absolutely nothing come the climb. But you'll certainly be in a difficult position, whereas others are going to be able to put out close to PB efforts. As you can see, when you get back to the group doing 2 and a bit watts per kilo, 3 watts per kilo, a lot of them that's going to be bordering on their zone 2, zone 3 boundary. So again, they're not going to be doing too much work there. You know, if you can get even further below that, you're going to be in a better effort later on. You're going to have more of a sprint left as well. You can see this little group has started to pull away now. See, with just 1 or 2 riders, you know, you don't necessarily have the threat, but now you've got 6 or 7. It's definitely worth people jumping across. See MJ from Herd, quite an experienced rider, been around the block for a while, and seeing this and just jumping over. We'll start to see a couple of riders who are normally sat towards the back, maybe moving up through the group now. You know, this won't get away, but you just want to be careful that you don't get caught out if people suddenly start to jump. I'll just move towards the back to see if we've lost anybody so far. Because we've got such a big group of over 100, Zwift doesn't show everyone at once, so something you do have to be aware of, especially in these bigger size groups, that if you're looking at numbers even towards 80, you can have issues and you won't see the front, so you might miss some breakaways. It's one of the things you can play to your advantage. One of the other ones is, as I saw one of the races last week being won on Utopia, is when you're in a little bunch by this, you see all the names coming up. Usually they actually obstruct things, and you can sometimes use that as a little tactic for using ghost power-ups to get an extra kind of benefit when you jump. Normally when you use the ghost power-up, it's so short-lived that you hit the front, you use it just before you come through the front, so you're hidden a little bit, and then you have about 5-6 seconds off the front where you can kind of make some distance, and you know the most you're going to end up with is a 2-3 second gap. And that's quite extreme even for it, and then you reappear and usually that gets shut down. But if you wait and don't use it until just after you break the front and use the cover of all these names, sometimes you can get away with it. It's just one thing to have. If you're in a small group, you have to use the ghost earlier when jumping off the front. If you're in a bigger group, you can use it even later on and people won't necessarily notice you. It also helps if you're not in a really obvious bright blue kit, as we see with Paul. It makes you a bit more noticeable. Same with the KC guys in the yellow kit. Looking for a kit that normally just blends in. So looking at kind of a dark navy blue, greys, dark greys, blacks tend to be the kits that kind of blend in. So if you are not riding for a team, it's usually beneficial to pick one of those colours just so you're a bit less noticeable if you're going to go for a sneak attack. So you have lost a couple of riders with this pace being kept high. See a lot of people in the group pushing 3.5, 4 watts per kilo occasionally. Just because it is varying with these little attacks that Scotty's pushing off the front. It's going to be very helpful for the overall time though. So you're travelling 48 kph, which is good kind of TTT pace. Obviously we do have a big group, but while people are just chilling out, it's a very strong pace to be maintaining. Let's see, we've got a front group of about 96, 97. So just lose another rider here. Looks like quite a lighter weight rider, so they're going to be suffering on the flats. We'll jump back in with Sam, who's just kind of maintaining his position at the back, doing as little as possible. Find that Goose probably does the same. See if we can have a quick look at the numbers so far. Get some live information up for you. So we do have a little incline. I'll just hold off because it does get a little bit bumpy here. I doubt anyone will really push away, but you never know. One other little tip for breakaways that can be quite useful on this course. So obviously this course has a lot of sprint segments. I think it's 4 per lap. If I remember correctly, I'm not actually spot on. I think it's about 4. Plenty of banners to get power-ups as well, which means you want to keep using them until you get your arrow. In most races, obviously, and this will be the draft van, unless anyone is planning a kind of heavyweight downhill attack with an anvil before the finish. But yeah, one you can do with the breakaway. So when you go through a lot of these sprint segments, you'll tend to see the entire right hand side of the screen filled with, new PRs. Because, lots of people don't regularly do the course, and when you're in a group, if you haven't been on that course for a while, and especially in a big group like this, you're going to set good times through it without putting in too much effort. It's obviously less common on regular courses where you do it, week in, week out. But it's one thing to watch out for. So when you get that, when you get a 30-day PR, it shows up on your screen and covers your watts per kilo number. And so a lot of people will pay more attention to the numbers on the right-hand side rather than what your kind of avatar's doing on the road. So you can use that for a little breakaway attempt, and as long as you keep below, I think it's double your FTP, which is the get out of the saddle kind of sprinting avatar look, then you can sneakily push off the front or work through the group, and then as soon as that kind of PR covering your numbers is gone, you can then push through the front of the group. They're just little ways that, it's a tiny effect, but it can be enough to get you that gap, and once you've got that gap, it's possible to keep away and stay away. It's when you have 2 or 3 riders go, if you get someone on your wheel, then the rest of the group's more likely to chase. If you're a solo rider attacking, it's so unlikely to stay away that, the group will leave it, people don't really try. But, it is a feasible thing to do nowadays with the new draft dynamics. I've seen more and more solo attacks winning, especially if you can kind of go at it for about 5 minutes at near your 5-minute PB. Especially like looking at Cat B, if you see someone going away at 5 watts per kilo, which for the top end Cat Bs is just about doable, 5 minutes, maybe just short 4 minutes, and no one's going to want to chase that. You're not going to want to be the guy doing 5 watts per kilo chasing them down in the group, doing 5.5 probably to actually close it, and so the group might do 4, a couple of people will push the pace, but it won't actually gain on you significantly, and so you can kind of eke out a bit of a gap and do it. And, the key thing is you've got to get away without people with you. You've got to get that 4-5 second gap instantly. 3 seconds people will chase, people will sprint to get on. You get it out to 5 seconds very quickly without anyone on your wheel and you're good to go. So you see Sam's just stayed right at the back this entire time, just doing as little as possible. He is a lightweight rider, so he's using the wattage limits to stay in Cat B. So I think his pardon me, his 20-minute power is about 4.6, I think. Should be around 4.6. Which means because he's got sub 250 watt FTP, he's able to race in Cat B, but he has a significant advantage when we come to the climbs. Let's see. Yep, 4.6 for 20. So I'll just get the live kind of information up for you, and then we can just see who's in, see who the threats are, have a quick look. So he's coming down the list. Just sort it by 20-minute power just so you can see. So we've got Jane, another one, women, lightweight riders, 4.8 watts per kilo, Sam Atkinson, Stefan Brobeck, and this Marina, all four probably people to watch out for, and possibly making a breakaway on the climb. And again, it's going to probably come down to actual raw watt sprints. Obviously Sam Atkinson with his huge kind of watts per kilo number, if he's there at the end, will be in competition, as will anyone above 14 watts per kilo has a good chance if they position themselves well. Sully, Graham, Paul Harris. But then again, pure watts, I expect Paul from TBR, good position, Graham. Conson's always there or thereabouts, very strong rider from OTR. So lots of people in contention today, which will be good to see at the finish. And then we can see Scotty P with his interesting numbers at 123 kilos. So as you can see, nothing's really going on desperately. Everyone's just sat in waiting for the aqueduct, and even on the aqueduct we won't see too much necessarily. One thing that you might have noticed, might quickly just get it on your screen again so you can kind of take a look. If you have a quick look now and have a look at the average watts per kilo, so you see Sam, obviously a lighter rider, I'm going to do 3.5, but those heavier riders and the experienced riders, Paul Harris, Graham Miller, both really low ranked riders, 3.2, 3.1, 3.2, there's people at 3.7, 3.9. If you go further down, the less experienced riders usually, it's a bit unfair to them, but usually they have lower sprints, they haven't been on Zwift long, don't train it massively, see 3.5, 3.4, 3.7, 3.6, all doing far more work, and it really does make a difference. I can't emphasise enough how important it is to just keep recovering and resting as much as you can in the pack. In a race like this, it may not have as huge an impact because it is fairly flat. There's the aqueduct and then the Petit KOM, where there's going to be kind of any action, and the aqueduct could be quite a chilled affair. So you don't need to conserve that much, but again, going into the Petit KOM it will help. But on other courses where you're constantly punching, constantly climbs, things like Watopia, Figure Eight, any of the the Richmond courses that's not fan flat. Not even on fan flats, when you have the sprint and you have the little climb, it's constant punching. And if you can rest and actually be doing recovery pace in between there, it makes a big difference from just being over recovery pace. Some things I always say, if you have a course, say like the ZRL finals last season, season 6, when we were on Nyokyo, there was 4 sprints a lap, 12 sprints total, something like that. And if you can recover in between the sprints, you're in a much better position. And one way to do that is by sprinting on every single sprint. As horrible as it is, there's a big difference between doing, you'll do a 10-second effort, just sub-max, and then straight into recovery for the next 2, 3 to 5 minutes, depending on which one it was, versus, you're doing about a minute and a half at 5 to 6 watts per kilo, just to get back to the group and make sure you don't get dropped. And you get about a minute's rest, and then you're doing the same again. And it becomes a horrible threshold effort where you're doing like 2-minute bursts, like only just below your kind of 2-3 minute max, versus you're doing like 10-second tough bursts, but then you're totally resting the rest of the time. It's one of the things I always say, if there are segments, you're better off just going for it. Like, don't necessarily go all in every single segment, but you should go significantly close to your max every time, and make sure you can then recover afterwards. Because you're talking maybe 100 watts difference for a lot of these segments between getting points and not getting points, and just kind of holding on to the group. For the 100 watts extra difference, it's worth trying to contest those points, even if you're just grabbing a couple, because it makes it more worthwhile. You're going to be hurting either way. We see a little push as we come through this sprint segment. Not long to go at all to the aqueduct now. It's about 1.5 kilometres, 2 kilometres after this town. So you've got Kent Tri-Life at the front. Normally has an afro on, but he's got a helmet covering that. Just on the ZR, no, just standard helmet on. See who else we got up towards the front. Is that Scotty P? As ever, of course it is. Pushing 800 watts, attacking on the flat. Very interesting choice. It's not actually as bad as it seems. I make it out horrifically, but you know, you're coming into the aqueduct, and the worst but most sensible place to attack is on climbs. But you know, everyone knows it's coming. You're not going to get a significant gap that lasts by attacking on climbs unless they're really long, strong efforts, and you know the group's going to fracture. You see, Scotty is just chilled out. Not really sure what the purpose of that was. Whether he's hoping a few people would go with him, but he went too aggressively for that. You know, if you attack on the flats, or one of my favourite is to attack on downhills, but when the terrain changes, then you're more likely to get away because no one wants to go with you, no one thinks it's going to work or is a sensible move to make, and they'll leave you. Whereas on the climb, people are going to try and stick with you. 10 times as we saw Goose, Sam Atkinson, all the, like, usually some of the more experienced riders will stick towards the back and chill out until segments come up, and as soon as they hit a segment they know it's going to be quick, they'll move towards the front. But you know, if you can catch them out, attacking where they're not towards the front, where they're still sat at the back, not expecting it, it's one of the best ways to get away, especially from better riders who would beat you 9 times out of 10 otherwise. So as we come into the climb here, every left-hand turn goes to a steeper incline, the right-hand turns just chill out a bit. I think it's same at the Petty KOM, just something to remember. See, the pace isn't too high, it's very hard to break away here. You know, we're still doing above 30 kph. See, one person is trying to push the pace hard. But, you know, above 30 kph, you know, there's plenty of draft. So yeah, Colin Saunders, one of the OTR riders I mentioned earlier, very strong regularly in the ZRL playoffs. Normally racing in the Americas division, so not sure this must be a mid-lunchtime kind of ride for him, potentially. But just pushing the pace, you know, 8 watts per kilo is very strong effort. Especially he's maintaining it, but quite a few others are pushing it. Not sure in the benefit of doing this. Sam Atkinson's gone with them, just keeping an eye on it. And Paulie M, another TBR rider doing similar. 4-5 rides, can't imagine this is staying away. Whether people are just doing it, you know, prove a point, show them in business. If they see we can get all these PR, you can't see what any of these riders are doing at the moment because you've got the Aqueduct jersey or set a new PR. And during that time, you know, they could be doing 1 watt per kilo, and if you're pushing and chasing, you're just wasting energy. Or they could be doing 9 watts per kilo, and at which point they're going to be pulling away from you and you won't necessarily be aware of it. It's a very good time to put in a sneaky attack. See Saunders using an anvil, not the right time to do it. There is a bit of downhill here and it does last enough, but he used it slightly too early. I think it does work out as about 30 seconds of flat or downhill, but either way you're best off just binning it if you can. And he used it just before 4% incline, which didn't do him any favours. But here we go, we've got 3 riders together in the front, and the main group just together. We'll just see towards the back, see who we've lost. There is a bit of a gap opening up in the middle of the group, and people not quite holding and watching wheels as they should be. See Scotty P getting dropped there. Morphin, recognise the name, not quite sure why. He's jumping across. Because they're doing this on the downhill, letting that gap open up is the last thing you want to do, because if you're going to chase on now, you're going to have to do a lot of work. You might see some of the more sensible riders, if there are any here, just sitting back and then pushing as soon as it hits a flat. Have a look at some of the people we lost. So we have lost about, you know, another 10 or riders or so, 10, 15. Let's see, most of the experienced people still here. Strong 75 odd in the front group. I'm going to maintain this until we hit the KOM. And given the amount of power-ups being used, I think everyone is kind of, at least the guys towards the front who want to be aiming for the podium, have been using all of them until they get their draft van. And there is a benefit to the burrito, perhaps, for lighter riders. I'd still take the draft van every single day of the week, but a burrito isn't the end of the world. If you're light, you might be able to get a bit of a jump on the field, and realistically, if you don't have very good raw wattage on this quick slight down, I wouldn't say it's a downhill during the actual sprint finish, but it's a downhill leading into it, so speeds will be very high going into the finish. You know, it's very hard if you don't have raw watts. You know, looking at about 900 plus raw watts to actually get anywhere near the front, unless you have ridiculous watts per kilos, at which point you want to jump, you want to have kind of a late sprint, or go early, get that gap early and try and hold it. I suspect today will be a case of just sitting in. We'll see there's a right hand turn just off before the finish, and then it goes into a right hand bend round to the finish. We'll see the sprint probably started around that right hand turn off where the road goes off into the intestines, and the person who jumps just after that, keeping in the draft, will probably come through for the win. So it's all about just conserving the effort now before the KOM. Might be able to just see it on the mini map. Let's get it up. We take this left turn, then we go back and forth up the hill. The first start of it's about, I think it's around 3, 4, 5%. It's a bit flat through the line, and then a gentle incline. It's very draftable through the first section, but it's going to be about who can punch on the harder sections. I don't think the pace will go up that much, but you'll be looking at 5.5 probably on the front watts per kilo on the harder sections, maybe even up to 6 at times, and then back down to 4, 3-ish on the flatter bits. So while it is about a 5-minute effort, it's not just a kind of evenly paced 5-minute effort, especially not if you're doing it sensibly. So here we go into it. Lots of riders still left. It's going to be about which sprinters can hold on and if the lightweights can make any significant gap appear. As you can see, no one's really pushing it here. The experienced riders are all being very sensible, just getting to a nice, comfortable rhythm. There's plenty of draft to be had at this point. Again, you see the person using the burrito there, so I presume Sam's just pushed a little bit hard, just trying to get out of the way of that, but he was probably okay within it. Because the speeds are quite high with the group going into it quickly, you don't want to get caught by a burrito because it will slow you down significantly. There's quite a bit of the pace, 2-3 kilometers an hour is just coming purely from the draft, even at these lower speeds. Just trying to zoom out so we can have a bit of better group view of the group as we go through the climb. See, it is stretching out already, about a minute into it, and we're starting to lose people. So take the right hand turn, it's just a little bit flatter, a little bit more recovery, down to 1% or lower. We'll keep up again. And we just want to be a bit careful now as we're coming through these sections of burritos. So I'd recommend now that everyone who's kind of competing for that front group, wanting to be in there or push the pace, moves towards the front, just getting out of the way of those burritos, and use this incline here and the steeper section just to move up through it. You can see numbers edging towards 5 watts per kilo. So coming to the 7-8%, I expect to see a little bit hotter. Again, burritos being used, just slowing it down, causing issues. And there we go, yeah, getting into the mid-5s for a lot of the people. Again, we've kept quite a tight bunch here. A lot of people are going to be pushing above effort just to keep with the group for as long as possible. See Colin there, Dirt Riders just on the back of the group. It's not in the best position. You really want to be kind of towards the front third. And it just helps you mentally as well, even if not necessarily needed. Mentally, to be in that higher position really is important. As soon as you start dropping back, you feel like you're doing badly. It's easy to get in the mindset, and when you get efforts over, you know, a minute, 2 minutes, there is a bit of a mental aspect to it as well. See a couple of people pushing the pace a bit towards the front. And then little pushes off the front on the flat just make no sense. Like, it's all about drafting through these lower sections. These 2%ers, you just want to be really chilled out. See, Glime from KC just occasionally kicking 6 watts per kilo, then back down to 2. Very bizarre style. Haven't seen it for long enough to know if there's anything dubious going on, but seems to be doing well. But I don't know why you'd push off there. You'd want to use this section here, the higher percentage, to push off if you're going to do that. Otherwise, as you see, the pace of the group, when they hit the bottom of the steeper section again, just slowly reels him back in. So one of the things with this, if you are wanting to break away, you want to do it earlier now. I would like to have seen it going now, rather than any later on. You might wait until after the next, not the hairpin coming up, but the one after. You might see a few long kind of punts going then, but it won't necessarily get a big enough gap. See, we're down to about 40, 50 in the front group. See, it is stretching back, but 50 is a very large group coming on that downhill, and it will reel up a lot of riders unless you have a good 10-15 second gap now. It's the ideal situation for any of these lighter riders wanting to push away is to break it up totally. You don't want there to be a group. You want it to be little bundles of 3 to 5 riders at most coming down, and the closer we get to the line before you make that move, the more likely it is that there is a big group. See Gleam again pushing the pace, just doing these little bursts, and Smackson just moving towards the front onto his wheel, just keeping it nice and steady. See, now people are starting to ramp it up. It's quite a long effort from here, probably a solid minute effort. And again, you see the group so big, none of these riders behind and wanting to chase it individually. You have to this the biker. There's no need, you've got a big group, you're going to catch him back up. Again, they might be wanting to lose some of the sprinters in there. We see you've still got the likes of Goose, Paul Harris, except I think Paul's still there. Saw him. Lots of the riders who we spotted earlier as being heavier, stronger, powerful riders still there. Graham Miller's there. Good to see Tristan. Again, when the riders had time off, went down to see, worked his way back up. Doing really well again. We see that chase group there could very well make it back on. 4 seconds isn't going to be enough for the bike off the front. It's a strong effort up the climb, but it's not going to be significant enough, especially with anvils in play in a group. As you see, it'll be a very quick into super tuck for people here. And what riders have to be careful of is right now, as you see all the anvils being dropped, that they're moving forward through the group before they super tuck. What some people end up doing is, and it's usually a bit to do with technology, but their bikes just chill out. When they're dropping down, they don't necessarily go straight to 0, they go to like 400 watts, 300 watts, 200 watts, 100 watts, 0 over like 10 seconds, and it slows them down, slows them down, slows them down, so they're moving backwards through the group. And if you're doing that, then you get into your super tuck, then you don't have that same benefit from the draft that you do otherwise, and with the anvils they can just drop you off straight away. So it's really important that you try and push into super tuck, push up the watts, then drop off, and try and get it straight from a decent wattage up down to 0 in one go, and into the super tuck position. See a couple of riders towards the back just having to do a little bit of work, being a bit nervous. Down to front group, about 25 riders, perhaps. And most of the big hitters are here. We've got Hermosa, KC rider, been around a while, very strong. Paul's there, Graham Miller's there, Goose is there, Brobeck, ESRT, strong ride again. Sadly we have seemingly lost Scotty P, but we have Saunders from OTR. Again, we'll do some damage. There's a lot of riders with strong 1 minute efforts here, but it's not the course suited for them. Be interesting to see if anyone does try a long kind of push into the finish. Problem is when you have multiple riders like that, you know they can chase it down, but again it's a mental battle. You see someone going off the front doing 80 watts per kilo, even if you know they can hold it for a minute, you know you can hold close to it for a minute. It's a very different case to actually motivating yourself to jump across that early, do the work, and then risk being caught by the group. So yeah, and everyone's taking as long super tuck they can. One thing to be aware of, when it does drop to like -2% here, you can still be in super tuck. While it's not technically super tuck, you still get enough draft benefit that you don't necessarily need to get out. You can still do 0 watts per kilo and do okay. So you can see a little group coming back together. Probably should have kept more of an eye on that. You see someone going off the front there with their burrito. We've got a couple of people chasing them down. So this is the long attack I talked about, and you see Sam Atkinson going with them. So Sam Atkinson's pushing really hard off the front. See now the chasers are coming on. Tristan, etc. going hard. And Jay Goose, Paul all trying to chase down Sam. So it's a very, very long effort from him. And he hasn't... Oh, not sure if he's going to make it. If anyone in this group has managed to keep anything, they're going to be able to come through him comfortably. Not sure if Graham, Goose, anyone's got anything left here. Looks like they're going to start to get a reel in back in. Is it going to be too little too late though? He's blowing. Oh, he's going to be in a bad position. Graham's done it very well. He didn't go too early as we were watching on the screen. And now he's just moving through. He might hit the front slightly too early. Got Thompson coming through. And Paul with him. A couple of people coming from deep. And it's Graham who takes the win. Really good performance with Paul in second. Well done to them. Thompson, DBR was coming through hot there. But couldn't quite make it back on. So let's see if we can jump back with any of the other people further back. Have a look at the rest of the race. Got another group here. This Mikey P coming through strongly. Just timed it well, seemed to sit in. Should be comfortably taking it in that group. So we've got lots of little small groups as expected. When you get dropped off the back, it tends to get very fractured on that climb. It's very hard to come back through. See a little punch through at the front there from Joyson. Take the win in that group. We'll drop back, see if we can watch on the full groups as we come in. Okay, so we've got one person going off the front early. One of the lightweight women riders, Casse-Pattes. In here, but yeah, this attack off the front doesn't seem to be going with much kind of oomph. I think they've just glided to the front and just kept their position. See a couple of people starting to go now, so it's very late to be sprinting from now. And if you start going max out and hit the front, it should be okay. Especially with these burritos, Brooks might just be able to keep away off the front. Reinke's coming through quite hot. McKeever's coming through, but he should just hold it for Brooks. Oof, that was close on there. The three of them are fairly flat across. Again, because they left it late, the absolute latest you should be sprinting is just after that right turn. You know, obviously if you're at the front, you're in a bit of trouble at that point anyway. But you should be kind of a row or two back, maybe even 3 rows back, sprinting from that right turn. So you can see just at the top right of the minimap, well, top of the minimap now, that right turn, that's your kind of go marker. If you're really far back, you need to start going before it. If you're in a good position, you want to go just after it. Hopefully that's when other people go as well. So you see Scotty P going for a long range push here. But yeah, everyone's just sat in his draft. Charkin just gave a little kick. I'm not sure why he's using his burrito then. It's not the ideal time to be using it. He's going to hurt himself as much as anyone else around him. See, he's pushing again. He's gone a little bit too early. If he can get the 5 meter gap, he might be okay. But this Team Type 1 diabetes team, making awareness for it, seems to be just comfortably on his wheel. Don't know, he might be at a max effort, but he's just holding on his wheel, not doing too much. They managed to drop Scotty P there. And hopefully this Team Type 1 guy just pushes through now. Looks like he didn't have too much more, but he's taking the lead, and while this Charkin's doing significantly more now, TT1 guy managed to just time it really well, drafting while he could, and then just pushing through at the line. We've got a couple of solo riders now coming in. We'll go back all the way here where we've got a little bit of a group. So we've got a group of 5 here. Again, on the downhill, you just not want to go for the solo breakaway. Normally I'd suggest the group this small, you might want to chance at going alone, especially if you don't have a sprint. But we know 62 kph, 61, you're not going to be able to maintain that solo, and you're going to lose it a lot quicker by being towards the front, so it's not worth that attack. And you want to just be sat in, see where the guy in the, I think it's 15 kit, and the light blue 15 kit is. Oh, don't want to be using an anvil. That's a very poor choice. Not sure, is it Raymondo? It's going to hurt on the flats. You're getting no benefit from that extra weight. Oh, it was a poor decision. You see they're having to do 5.9, 5.5, what's good? They're not really making any ground. 7, and they're just barely catching someone doing 3.8. You know, they're in a good position here. They just don't want to come through the front. While there is a solo rider ahead of them, they might be able to chase down. You want to sit in just behind. See Souza pushing through the front. There, Raymondo going again. Just want to sit in behind. Now should be all out from here. Doesn't have the time. Oh, that burrito is going to hurt him. But he needs to keep going, keep pushing all the way through. There we go. There are the big numbers. No one around him's doing enough. He's left a little bit late, but he should still come through. So again, if anyone else had been doing similar numbers, he'd have left it a bit too late to push then. But he had the big numbers, he had the big sprint, and was able to kind of safely do it. See Brown here chasing down an eco 2-second gap. Unless he suddenly brings out a full sprint, he's unlikely to close that fully. Okay, so just get the results up on screen for you now. They are provisional, but usually stay fairly similar. As we said, Graham Miller taking first, Paul Harris second, both dirt riders. MJ Mark John from Herd taking third, coming through. I'm not sure whether he was one being overtaken or was coming through. Rosenberg, Thompson in fourth, Goose in fifth, really good result for him. Tristan in sixth, very strong dirt contingent here. Hyde from Talent Fry, Colin from dirt as well. Then Colin Saunders, OTR, Healy and Huber. Got a couple of the KC guys, Sam Atkinson, even though he went for the long breakaway, got caught, he still finished well. It's one thing to be aware of, you know, if you do have that ability, but you don't have a pure sprint. Obviously with Sam, he has a bit of both, very strong rider. But if you do have that kind of long 1 minute effort, 2 minute effort in you, you're still going to finish high up if you go for it and get caught. It's best to at least do something, try it, give it a shot. There's no point just sitting in every single race, finishing 10th, 15th. It's worth going for it, going all or nothing. If you get first, who cares? Well, sorry, not. If you get first, that's great. But if you don't, who cares? You're still going to get a good position. It's worth trying it, trying something interesting, and it might work. Just go down. So if you look at the riders finishing a bit further back, see all 4.1, 3.5, 3.6, 4.2, 3.6, 3.8 on the watts per kilo, and then as we move up towards the front, so, 3.4, 3.5, 3.4, it's not massively different, but it is lower, and I'm sure if you take like the top 10 average of most races that aren't kind of a finishing climb or a big 20-minute effort, you'll notice that the top few riders usually have a lower watt per kilo. Just something to think about, to be aware of. Anyway, thanks for joining us. I might try and do it next week as well, if people are interested. And well done to everyone who is taking part.